Welcome back. My next guest is Tilewa Adebajo. He's an economist and a chief executive officer of CFG Advisory Services. We'll continue our conversation and outlook for the economy in 2017. Quite a lot to talk about. And of course, most people have already begun to despair with the way 2016 ended and how 2017 is looking like. What will actually shape, what fundamentals will shape the dynamics of the economy? Tilewa Adebajo joins me to talk about this. So good morning to you. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you. Good morning, Harriet, and a happy new year to you.
Well, happy new year to you too. And is it a happy new year for, let's start with the monetary aspect of it. It seems to be one of the biting issues, currency issues. For most parts of 2016, monetary policy was in a tightening mode. What do you expect in 2017, vis-a-vis taking a look at where the exchange rate is at the interbank foreign exchange market, that's the official window, and the other segments of the market?
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I think it's very important to realize that in about 2 months' time, it would have been 2 years since General Buhari was elected as president. And in another 4 months, he's going to have to give his midterm report. Unfortunately, because the trajectory that we see on the momentum for growth is still negative, and there's still momentum in that trajectory of negative growth. So it might well be by the time he's giving his midterm report, the economy will still be in recession, which is quite unfortunate. The issues you've mentioned around foreign exchange and the prices have resulted in 5 different rates within the markets and has caused a lot of distortions in the foreign exchange market. So we are going to have to see some harmonization in that going forward if we're going to look at some serious stabilization for 2017. That is a major issue that the central bank will have to address.
Not to talk about the constant drawdown on external reserves, even though we saw that trying to come up a little bit as revenue came in from some of the oil sold into that particular reserve.
Well, the reserves are neither here nor there, and I think we've come to accept the fact that because of the fall in oil prices, our reserves are going to be at a particular level. The issues are not really with the reserves, but basically how the central bank has mismanaged the foreign exchange regime.
But then, what type of review would you like to see? Talking about, well, most will not agree with you. Well, it's neither here nor there. It's an argument about how the regulator has actually managed reserves. But what type of review would you like to see in 2017?
Well, in 2017, like I said, what is important is that you need to harmonize your foreign exchange rates. And I think it's also important to put this in a historical perspective. At the time, we were removed from the JP Morgan bond index. The people in the JP Morgan, talked about a concern for the fact that the foreign exchange system was based on allocation, and they requested that they move into what you call a flexible regime and float the naira to a regime which we are currently operating. It took the central bank another year to move into that system. And when they finally moved into that system, they have not really backed up that system. And you're finding so many different systems of politically based or politically induced allocation of foreign currency, which is causing major distortions in the markets. So when you have a foreign exchange market where rates are applicable from as low as 190 all the way to 500 now with the dollar on the parallel markets, then it's a major distortions. You've had a special allocation for manufacturers of about $600 million in November, and all these things are eventually not going to work because they're going to cause distortions in your economy. And in terms of looking at the foreign investors and, of course, the local investors trying to invest, you're not sending the right signals. So there's need to harmonize that foreign exchange rate. If we're going with a single flexible exchange rate system, bid and offer system, then get all the parallel market operators, all the banks and everybody to commit to a single market.
Before now, there had been a lot of talk that there's been so much focus on the monetary authorities. Let's talk about the fiscal authority. They're supposed to work very closely with the monetary authorities to ensure that the economy gets to the stands and the level it should be. Now, the president in his budget speech talked about harmonization of fiscal, monetary and, of course, trade policies. We're talking about harmonizing Forex policy, but do you think that if, for instance, we had a proper synergy between fiscal, monetary, and even maybe trade policies, that would actually kind of ease the pressure on the economy?
Yes, and that's what we need. Many African countries, such as Ethiopia, Kenya, are doing very well. Tanzania, Uganda, you can see how they've harmonized their policies, and you can see growth in those economies of 5 to 7% per annum. And their GDPs are only about 70 billion compared to our own GDP of about 420 billion excess. So that's the sort of thing we're seeing. They're talking about an economic recovery plan that they want to bring out to support the budget. The Senate President has mentioned the fact that he's looking at 12 to 13 new bills to support this budget. So just as the Lagos State government has done very early this year that have passed their budget, I think it's also important that the government should work with the National Assembly to pass this budget on time. Let's understand what their roadmap for economic recovery would be, and let's begin to see that harmonization. Once you see that, then the confidence will return to the markets.
But then, still on this argument, some say that it really has to come from the monetary policy. It's what they would decide. They'll kind of determine what the spending plan is really going to be all about. For instance, in the budget, we have the Naira-dollar exchange rate at 305. It's premised at 305. And then for the oil benchmark is at 42.50. But even at that, some still are calling for the restructuring of the Central Bank of Nigeria, that maybe we might begin to see an easing in rates, for instance. Do you agree?